Now I have to. Oh, I'm not the. Can you make me host? Wait. Caroline, I think you have to make me host because you started the meeting.
Okay. There you are.
Okay. Just 1 second, guys. I have to start our live broadcast, and that takes a few seconds. And you have to be a little patient with us because today I only have one screen, so I'm a little bit limited. Both I and Juliana are in Zagreb in Croatia for a project, and we are not at home. One more second and we will start. All right, Caroline, if you can start.
Sure. Okay, good. So welcome everyone. It's super nice to see you again. It was a super nice session last time. In this series of this 5th edition of our online course and workshop for writing this manifesto for the Just City, which is organized by the TU Delft Center for the Just City, and it's in collaboration with several universities. So I'm Caroline Newton. I'm here with my wonderful colleagues, Roberto Rocco, Juliana Gonzalez, and Hugo Lopez. And I don't know if Jonathan is here, but over the course of the next weeks, others will join us as well. And as I said, we are so excited to have you here today, and especially because we really like to see this community growing. A community of people committed to spatial justice and this idea of the just city. And Roberto already said it's being live streamed on YouTube, but it also will be available as part of the Duty of Care podcast. And several episodes of this are already available online, and the links will be shared in the chat. But today, as we discuss this idea of the just city, we have to be clear that we cannot ignore the conflicts that continue to affect people globally. The wars in Ukraine, in the DR Congo, in Sudan, in occupied Palestine, and now also in Lebanon. It reminds us how interconnected our world is and how crucial justice is if we want to find peace and a good life for everyone. And we really condemn the violence that is affecting civilians all around the world, especially the ongoing genocide in Palestine. And we really urge a solution that upholds human dignity and life. And I would like to now give the word to Juliana.
Hi, everybody. My name is Juliana Gonçalves, and we are a team at the TU Delft Center for the Just City, focused on social sustainability and spatial justice. Today, we have the second session of the 5th edition of the Manifesto for the Just City. In the last few years, our event has grown into a global initiative, attracting more than 900 students from more than 100 universities from all over the world, and resulting in 3 published books, as well as another one to be published soon, with a total of 266 manifestos. Our books are available for free download from the website of TU Delft, and the link is being shared in the chat. I just want to remind you that our event is open to anyone. This indication that the event is aimed at students from disciplines related to the built environment is really just an indication. This is a real open event for anyone concerned with the Just City to join.
We are going to introduce our guest speaker, Stefania Milan, who is in the room in a few seconds. But before, let me explain a few things about the Manifesto workshop. The Manifesto started in 2019 as an initiative of our group, inspired by the scholarship of Professor Faranak Miraftab from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. In her scholarship, Professor Miraftab emphasizes insurgent planning practices that challenge exclusionary neoliberal governance and empower marginalized communities to reclaim their right to the city. She talks about imagination as a tool to combat the sense of hopelessness, where people may feel that nothing will work and politics is corrupt, so everything we do is pointless. This is a feeling that I see with students quite a lot. Anything that we do is kind of pointless. Miraftab highlights that imagination is a form of insurgent practice, a means to envision and articulate alternative futures and challenge dominant power structures. This speaks to her idea of hope as a political practice. And I really would like to emphasize this. I already talked about this in our first session, but hope as a political practice for Professor Miraftab refers to the active use of hope as a means to drive social change. So we understand hope and imagination as tools for us to imagine different things from the prevailing systems that we have. Because if we cannot imagine things, we cannot change what is there. And we accept what is there as if it was natural. Rather than being a passive feeling, hope becomes a tool for action that enables us to imagine and fight for alternative futures. It challenges the prevailing power structures and fosters resilience against the idea that meaningful change is impossible. In this perspective, how we deal with data and information in this information age is central to understanding the world. Critical data science is an interdisciplinary approach to data science that scrutinizes the social, ethical, and political dimension of data collection, analysis, and interpretation. I'm sure Stefania is going to give a better definition, but that's the definition that I'm working with. Unlike traditional data science, which often focuses on technical accuracy and predictive capability, critical data science questions how data practices may reinforce inequality, affect privacy, shape public discourse, and contribute to biased outcomes. Drawing on fields like sociology, ethics, and critical theory, it seeks to expose the implicit assumptions and power dynamics embedded in data-driven technologies. So we have this very special guest today who is going to help us unpack these ideas of critical data science. Stefania Milan is a professor of critical data studies at the Department of Media Studies, University of Amsterdam. She was also faculty associate at the Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society of Harvard University. Her work explores the interplay between digital technology and data, political participation, and governance, focusing on infrastructure and agency. I don't want to extend myself too much because I already spoke quite a lot, and I would like to give the floor to Stefania. Thank you so much for being with us today.
So much. Welcome, colleagues. Can you hear me? Good. You might occasionally also hear a little child speaking on the background. I hope it's not a big problem. Thank you for the invitation, but also thank you for the very nice introduction. May I ask the host to allow me to share the screen, because I have a PowerPoint presentation that I prepared for you, but I seem to be unable to do so. If it's not too much trouble, I would like to show you my pictures. I can also not hear you for some reason. Oh, yes, I can. I think I can now. Okay, good. I think I can. Let's select the screen that I want to share. There's a little bit of mess here with pictures. I don't know. What do you see? You see my mailbox.
No, we see the PowerPoint. We see the
Okay,
presentation.
awesome. Awesome, fantastic. So thank you so much for having me here. It's very exciting to be together, though only virtually, with such a diverse group from all the corners of the globe. It's only virtual, but it still feels the power of this community coming together in the hope to work together towards a just city. We definitely need it, and we need your energies and your ideas. As a little disclaimer, I'm a bit sick, so I see how long I can keep up with this. But well, without further ado, I go on and share with you what I have prepared. So my title for today is Beta Testing Democracy. And beta testing democracy even originally had like a question mark, but then I was like, actually, I removed the question mark. And I tell you why. So I'm interested in trying to think along with you whether a just city is even possible in the age of artificial intelligence and its application that are increasingly used to solve societal problems. Is it traffic? Is it poverty? Is it diversity? You mean that diversity is a problem? It's not, in my opinion. Well, more and more, what we notice is that policymakers, with the blessing of the industry, adopt what I call techno-solutionism. So they try to solve societal issues with technological tools. Now, we all know that technology is fantastic. I mean, technology is also what allows us to be together virtually today. And I love technology. But what I'm going to do today is try to show also the negative sides of it, because we have enough marketing that actually only, broadcasts the added value and the seamless life that we can have if we adopt all possible technological solutions. So my argument is that we have to be aware what is happening. We have to be, to some extent, also scared of certain developments, but we also have to try to resist and counter them. So not all technology is bad, but some might be. Now, beta testing democracy refers to, well, that is derived from computing, at least the part on beta testing, but it also derives from my conversation in the field with activists for digital rights. So one of them, at some point, told me that social media, they were referring to the role of social media in, somewhat shaping the results of elections. So they said social media companies are beta testing our democracy. What is beta testing? Beta testing in computing, but also in product development, refers to a phase in the development, for example, of a software in which it's kind of in advanced stage of development, but we don't know whether it's good to go. So instead of sitting in the lab or in the development room for longer, what technologists often do, they offer it to the market, and they make real users play with it, often to a segment of the population or to the broad market, in the hope that real users would help them identify problems and also solutions. So beta testing is, in a way, refers to playing out with, in this case, technological solutions, in a way that, however, and this is why the title is there, might actually be harmful of, in this case, the democratic process. So I wanted to explain you where I'm coming from, and then I would like to start with a couple of examples. So I don't know whether we have some people from Hong Kong here, maybe you're there, I don't see you, but if you were there, but also if you were simply following the news, you might remember that in 2019, there were some protests, pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong. They attracted my attention for a variety of reasons, including, from my perspective, as someone who looks at the technology in, for example, the urban fabric, that because protesters were seen taking down smart lampposts, so towers with, not towers, but like the posts with streetlights, which were believed to host also facial recognition technology cameras. Now, facial recognition technology is a type of artificial intelligence. It's a type of biometric technology that tracks the features, in this case, facial features, but there's also, There's also cameras that track movement, for example, and other types of bodily features. But essentially, what facial recognition camera do is that they take a picture of our facial features, not really the same picture that we would see with our eyes or take with a normal camera, but they measure the distance between, for example, the tip of my nose, the tip of my chin, the corner of my eye. The assumption is that these distances are unique to me. Each of us have different facial features. They're fairly unique to each of us. And this sort of mask that is created with dots and lines is unique. It can then be used to identify us, similar to what in the past was doing and still being done, in fact, with fingerprints, right? They are also supposedly unique to each and every of us. Now you will say, well, but come on, like we have had these cameras across the urban environment for a very long time, or cameras, so what's special about this one? Well, what is special about facial recognition technology is that these facial features are captured, but they're also immediately in real time matched with an existing data sets and matched, therefore, with identity. It is the equivalent of walking around town with an open passport in my forehead. So it's not just giving out my facial features, my body, which we do all the time when we are, walking around, but it's also linking bodily features to my identity. You can imagine how protesters in Hong Kong, but also elsewhere, fairly worried about being identified as protesters. The effects are potentially problematic if you live in a flimsy democracy or in an authoritarian country, even worse. But as you can see, even people, who might think I've got nothing to lose, usually get worried about these things. There are actually several cases of arrests, including around Black Lives Matter, that were implemented. I mean, they were the result of identification using facial recognition cameras. Now, the problem is that these cameras are, although technology development goes very fast, are still relatively precise in their identification of people. Just to give you a sense, in 2020, the City of London in the UK implemented a facial recognition camera system across town. The accuracy rate, according to an independent study by a local university, was 19%. You heard me well, 19%. So out of 100 people identified as criminals, 81 were actually misidentified. And we know for a fact, there's plenty of literature in that, about that this technology works at its best with white male faces. They don't go very well with other skin colors, other skin complexions, and also other genders. So you understand the extent of the problem here. Second example I would like to take you to is a very local Dutch example. I don't know whether the Dutch in the room know about this. This is a project for Brainport in Eindhoven. The idea, so this is just a rendering, right, of an ideal neighborhood in the city of Eindhoven in the southern Netherlands. That was being designed as a living lab. Draaiboek means basically book of rules for this living lab. The reason why it is there in Dutch is because this is actually leaked material that I got access to through a fellow scholar who is very worried about these developments. She got her hand into this material and then decided to leak and spread it as far as possible, because what was going to be done there gave air and many others of us pause. So the idea here was to create a neighborhood where you could live rent-free. Isn't that awesome to live rent-free? I mean, I can tell you I live in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, and the rent is a large portion of my salary. And thanks goodness I have a salary. But what if I didn't have it, right? So, a sizable portion of our income goes into rent. But then the question, of course, is, okay, and what do I have to give in exchange for being able to live rent-free? All your data. And by all your data, I mean pretty much anything from your phone data to your sewage data. So what goes down the toilet? The idea here was to, give access to the industry, local administrations, but also some universities or researchers, including my own university, the University of Amsterdam, to unique, real data, real life data about people's behavior, whereabouts, preferences, and you name it. Now, this is worrisome, in my opinion, because besides breaking quite some existing regulation, like the General Data Protection Regulation in the European Union, it taps on, it builds upon, it exploits existing forms of inequality. So we have technology that, like in the case that I mentioned with facial recognition, lands on deeply unequal societies, where some people might be very tempted to live rent-free in exchange for their data. So data exploitation happens at the expenses of the weakest among us. Now, of course, all of these smart city, experiments, they might start with a small segment of the population and quite localized. But I can tell you that this technology is tested there, then they might be, no matter how draconian, they might come to the neighbor near you or to your very safe neighborhood. That's why we should all be worrying about this. Now, all of these technologies and the city that I mentioned, but biometric technologies, a plethora of artificial intelligence technology that are so diffuse today in our urban environment, form part of what I call in my research regulatory data infrastructure. I'm going to tell you in a minute what regulatory data infrastructure is, but I want to provide another example of how this regulatory data infrastructure might discriminate. Here, it's also again a case from the Netherlands. I like to pick in the Netherlands, not only because I live here, so I know it the best probably, but also because the Netherlands is an advanced democracy. So there are in place quite some safeguards. I mean, from human rights onwards, privacy, data protection, which are human rights, there's quite some awareness about all of these things. So imagine if these developments happen here, what might happen when you have like a weaker rule of law, for example. And we tend to think that democracies are so good at protecting us. They are to some extent, but still, with technological developments, we really have to keep our eyes open as citizens and as students as well. So this is a student, the one with the darkened complexion, at one of the two universities of Amsterdam, that used proctoring software to invigilate exams. What is proctoring software? It uses facial recognition camera software, and it exploits the little camera that exists in your laptop if you have one, at the top there. And it is used to invigilate exams, meaning it allows us teachers to spy, literally, to control the students when they do the exams in the solitude of their room, for example, during COVID. We want to make sure that they're not copying. So this is the software solution, very techno-solutionistic solution to a problem that otherwise we didn't know how to solve better back then, right? So what these students realize is that as she was in the virtual exam room, the software kept telling her what you see there in Dutch, in the title, prove that you are human. Imagine the stress. The student, you're already taking exam, that's a stressful situation itself. You're isolated from your family and friends during COVID. On top of that, the software discriminates against you, does not recognize you. Why is that? Precisely because this was not a male and white person. I mean, the white person next to the student is actually the person that helped her to bring to court a university on a discrimination case that unfortunately was not won, but I spare you the details. But this is to say it can really happen very close to home, also in our environments, like, for example, if you're a student when you are taking an exam. But I just put on the light because I realize it's getting darker and darker here. Okay, just a second. Sorry, I have a better light, but it's apparently broken now. So anyway, I put it down. If you stop seeing me, you just try to say something, and then in any case, you're watching the screen. Okay, I mentioned that these are regulatory data infrastructure. So they are all the technologies that we're talking about. They are different, but what they have in common is that they are technologies that are, so technology, and I use the term infrastructure, so they're actually physical devices plus software that generate data that is used in real time for regulation. That's why regulatory data infrastructure. So this is used to monitor the population or for decision making. What is interesting is that today this technology increasingly take up functions that were once performed almost exclusively by humans as part of, for example, the state apparatus like the public administration. The picture that you see on the background is a picture from the back screen of a thermal camera. So a thermal camera is a camera that tracks the temperature, right? Again, very popular thanks to COVID, but they existed also before. This is a great example of how you monitor the polity. So who belongs to a given community at a certain time. I once went to a congress, it was during COVID times. There was this camera at the entrance, and on the spot, technology was determining whether each and every individual was allowed to get into the congress or not. And the assumption that for public safety and everyone's happiness, if you're on a temperature, maybe we have COVID, maybe it's better if you stay out of here, right? So as I said, this technology can also help us. This is a great example of how it can, for example, contribute to keep public health. But as you can see, it can also go in many different directions, especially if, as I said, there are some discriminatory after effects that derive from the design of technology. So I want to spend a few minutes talking about the problems, some of which I've already mentioned, but there are some others that I've not mentioned. So adopting this technology in the urban space, facial recognition cameras are a great example. They're pretty much all around us in the city, regardless of where you live, and you don't distinguish them from a regular old-style cameras, right? They're still an electronic eye, but you don't know that they actually do more than the old-style electronic eye. So the adoption of this technology often happens outside the democratic scrutiny. And I don't actually say, okay, go and ask start a referendum to ask each and every citizen of Amsterdam, for example, to stay with my city, whether they want facial recognition cameras or not. Disclaimer, they are in Amsterdam, we have plenty of those. But there's also other ways of, for example, safeguarding democratic decision-making, like, for example, asking the local municipality, right? Asking our representatives, because we vote for them. They can hopefully defend our interests. So a lot of this happens completely outside this democratic scrutiny. There's a famous case from my home country, from my country of origin, Italy, in Como, which is a city at the border with Switzerland. A few years ago, there was a big scandal because facial recognition cameras were adopted around the train station, the bus station, and the public park to monitor crime that was in the local administration's mind was the consequence of undocumented migration. Being this like a border town, these people were trying to go north, as often happens when people come through the Mediterranean to Italy. You actually want to stay there. No one was informed, but as it turned out, also the people who were in charge of making the decision actually not fully appreciated what this technology was about. So it's not only this technology adoption happens outside democratic scrutiny, but often those in charge of overseeing our interests are not skilled enough to understand the technology. Which brings me to a second point, the role of for-profit contractors. So these technologies cannot be operated solely by the state. You need the industry to do that. And the industry operates as its mandate for profit. No big surprise. There's nothing wrong with that, right? It's neoliberalism. But the problem is that we entrust a number of personal data, like my identity, to the providers of the technology, like facial recognition cameras. Digital vaccination passports are also another good case of this. So we give our health data, our digital identity data to the providers of these apps, for example. So essentially, the industry penetrates more and more into the state machinery and also into the urban governance. All of this often happens in a gray social legal area. We don't know, like, technology innovation is much faster than regulation. Regulation plays regularly catch up with technological innovation. Facial recognition technology is a great example. Only recently in Europe, for example, it has been marginally, to some extent, regulated through the AI, Artificial Intelligence Act. Fourth point, I already mentioned it extensively, potential for discrimination. These technologies are designed for and trained on data sets which are biased, because our society is biased. And so the result is the case that I mentioned about this student of darker complexion in Amsterdam. Fortunately, there's plenty of other examples of discrimination through technologies of this kind. But it's also incredibly difficult to opt out. I mean, I cannot really opt out of walking around town when there is facial recognition cameras if I don't even know that they are there. Or I cannot opt out of, for example, vaccination passports or digital identity systems. In the country where I live, in the Netherlands, we definitely cannot drop out. The sixth point I would like to draw to your attention is the huge, enormous, really, climate footprint that this technology there. The industry is in the business of telling us that they're awesome, and in fact, it's probably much better for the environment to meet on Zoom than it is to meet, physically here in the Netherlands altogether. We probably wouldn't even be able to. But nonetheless, all of this technology work because there are huge data centers which are really water and energy hungry. And we don't have to forget that this is really a big problem. Projection says that by 2027, data centers will consume 1/5 of the world electricity. And I'm not even talking about water. And finally, the other reason to worry is that while these technologies are adopted often behind our back, they become increasingly normalized. And once they are in the urban fabric, they are not going to be retired. They are rarely retired. So they go very quickly unnoticed. Now, my hypothesis, and I have a huge project that's going to look into that for the next 5 years, but we just started. So take them as provocative hypotheses that I would like to share with you. I don't have right now any data to back them. I'm gonna, by the way, also hire PhD students in case some of you are interested. You find at the end of the presentation my contact details, and we're gonna work on this. So my hypothesis is that more and more governance of the urban fabric and of the social today is mediated by data infrastructure of the kind that I've just described. And I have 3 hypotheses about that. All of them actually quite negative and sad. The first is that the more we install our technology in the urban fabric, the more it is likely to change our ability to exercise citizenship, because we lose autonomy and agency. Secondly, because of the industry and the private sector getting into the state machinery, we will see a shift in the sovereignty and the state-making ability away from the state more and more into the private sector. And finally, and this will not surprise you given what I said earlier, these developments will only augment, increase the inequality that already exists in our society. We are moving quickly towards a society which is modeled on techno-solutionism, whereby technology is used to solve problems that are much more complex than technology can actually solve, and which have social, historical, cultural, racial, gender, and you name it, dimensions that technology can not entirely account for. I like to refer to the work of a sociologist that actually never did any work on technology, but he looks at medicine and pharmaceutical trials. Back in the 80s and 90s, Stephen Epstein from Northeastern University in the US wrote about the standard human. What did we mean? So he said, pharmaceutical trials are done on white male population for a variety of reasons that I don't bore you with, which have to do with the need of scientific research to control as many variables as possible. But this, by definition, excludes many others, which is a reason why, for example, we know very little about the symptoms of heart attacks on women because most of the research is done on men. And we assume that because we know how men have suffered and died from a heart attack, that we can extrapolate that knowledge and extend it also to women. the situation is a bit more complex because our bodies are different, right? And I'm just basing, just using gender as a variable here, but I just wanted to give you a quick example of the dynamics that I'm observing here. So what Epstein said is that the standard human designed by scientists is then used to draw conclusions about the rest of society, but by default, someone is excluded. Techno-solutionism, which is the trend of solving complex societal issues using simplified solution through technology, contributes to perpetuate this tendency to regulate and design society and cities just for the standard human. I'll give you an example of what this means in practice. If you go through airport security, normally there's a bodily scan. There's two options when normally the person in charge of stationing the boot clicks for you. So they have to say, is this a man or is this a woman, the one coming through the security check now? And on the basis of that, the machine will concentrate on different body parts, on different features. This automatically excludes those who do not identify as a woman or man, and male or female, right? As we know today, there's plenty of varieties of identification. And for example, trans individuals automatically suffer from this regulation done exclusively, or the solutions thought planned exclusively for the standard human. So this actually worries me big time because it produces inequality and exclusion. What's more, this techno-solutionism ends up legitimizing this inequality and exclusion. Why? Because, and there's plenty of studies on that, but in a variety of disciplines, by the way, we tend to trust a decision by a computer or by a regulatory data infrastructure, which is software, much more than we trust a decision made by a human. And it's also much more difficult to seek a redress and correction. So to correct and question and prove wrong the computer is more and more complicated. Often, who sits next to the computer also, by the way, doesn't know exactly how it operates. With most of these algorithms operating in the realm of machine learning, it's also simply very difficult, technically speaking, to understand how the software makes determinations, because the software learns from the data and from its operations. Now, I would like to leave you with not just a bad message, but also a little bit of homework, because we have great hopes that you, the younger generations, and the people that have the luxury of study and thinking about how to make a just city, have a big role to play in correcting these developments. These developments are happening as we speak, but it's not too late to try to change course. And I would love if in your manifesto for a just city, you also try to think about the role of technology and trying to think about how we can counter all of these potential negative consequences that I only briefly mentioned here. So what needs to be done? This is really homework, some of which we can take home with us. Some of that is the job of our democratic representatives, but as citizens, we can ask for it. So not everything is for you to do, but it is definitely in our horizon to think and care about. So how can we safeguard a just city amidst the advancement of techno-solutionism? We have three main instruments. The first is a robust regulatory framework. Now, in the European Union, for example, we have recently adopted the European Union Artificial Intelligence Act. It's okay, could be better. I mean, no piece of legislation is ever perfect, but especially it's very difficult to account also for all the exemption and facial recognition cameras. Is, for example, there's a number of is exempt when it comes, for example, from this regulation when it comes to public safety. So the use by police forces, which is extremely problematic, to the point that New York, the city of New York and San Francisco actually banned this technology for a while ago. So what I want to say is that there are some good developments in the regulatory framework, but a lot more needs to be done. And we have to act at the local and the national and the supranational level to make sure that we keep these technologies in check, or that we use them within the democratic and human rights framework. We also need ethical guidelines for technological development. those amongst you who are expert in technology development, please take the ethics of technology serious, but also try to think about ethics, not just from the perspective of Western citizens, but a little bit broader than just Western approaches to what we mean ethical and we mean by normative. And finally, citizen awareness. We need to inform ourselves. We need to question what happens in our urban environment. We need to become more attentive to all the technology that we see around us and not just take them at face value because they're cool and because they facilitate our life. We want our lives to be easy, don't get me wrong, but we also want to make sure that our urban environment is welcoming of all the different possible ways of being in the world, and also that human rights are respected. Instruments for citizen awareness are many. I'll give you an example to think about. In the city where I live, but it's pretty much everywhere, there are smart billboards. So there are these billboards, like they are the size a bit bigger than a human being, of course, much broader. So they are like 2 meters tall, a bit bigger, larger, you know, like a meter and something large. And they change. The picture that you see there changes regularly. Those billboards implement some artificial intelligence tools that verge towards facial recognition. So facial recognition is emotion detection, which is another form of biometric technology. They react to the urban environment. In the city of Amsterdam, this is allowed, but I actually really don't like it. And with the PhD students, we're working to try to find exactly how this software works and whether, you know, we have enough material to advocate against this type of technology. Now, what does these instruments have in common? I'm quickly getting towards the end also because I can probably see in the background, my child is not very happy. She needs to have dinner and they're waiting for me. So what these instruments have in common? The robust regulatory framework, the ethical guidelines, the citizen awareness. I also use technology, so I actually asked ChatGPT to tell me what they have in common. And the solution is public values. They all have in mind an ideal of a society, an ideal of a just city that we want to strive towards. And here you see what public values are. I normally am a bit wary of using the terminology public values because values luckily change also across different societies. I find actually when we talk about values, I find human rights to be a very good starting point to think about, you know, technology implementation as well. But otherwise, you know, we are talking about issues of democracy, justice, equality, equity, freedom, transparency, accountability, sustainability, and the protection of human rights and the environment. And really to conclude, what can we do? This is the real homework that I have for you. I invite you to think from the pluriverse. Now, I'm dropping this word there. It derives from a fantastic book that I actually also have here. It's one of the few books that I keep here with me all the time. Is Arturo Escobar, a fantastic anthropologist, probably one of my personal heroes. He talked about diversity and how we can actually think about in terms of a pluriverse, a world where many worlds fit, rather than a world model on me and my preferences, right? A universe. So let's try to think from the vantage point of making comfortable as many people as we can, even in a very technology-driven society. We need to invest in digital literacy in education, which starts from school, passes through events like this one, a Manifesto for a Just City, where we make room to learn together and discuss, right? But it also means that probably we need to ask for more programs at the local level, through libraries, but also in our schools, that teach us how to be citizens and inhabitants of environments that are more and more technology-driven. We can participate in the governance, I put there AI, but in the governance of technology. We can inform ourselves. There's plenty actually of occasions at the local and national and supranational level to partake in the design of technology. If you want to know more about that, there's no time to go into that now, but I can answer questions and give you some ideas. We have to keep our eyes open. That's why monitoring and oversight. If we're not told what happens, we have to ask for it and we have to question and ask what is this and what is that? What is that camera doing that? What technology is sitting there? We have the right to know, and normally in countries and in local municipalities, there's provisions that allow you to ask this question. maybe through Freedom of Information Acts or similar type of transparency measures. And finally, there's something very, very easy you can start from tonight: ethical consumption. You have the power, and it is in your right as a consumer, besides as an inhabitant of a city, to say no. Say no to technology that you consider too invasive, that you consider too unjust towards certain sector of the populations, even if we are not discriminated by this technology. I personally don't want to live in a society that discriminates, in an urban environment that discriminates against half of my friends. So I leave you with this. Here you have some of my contact details. I'm very, very curious to see what comes up from your manifesto exercises, but I hope that if anything, I've contributed to instill some critical questions about our technology-driven urban environment. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Stefania. I hesitate because I think there will be questions, but I know your family is waiting for you to have dinner. I'm not sure if you have time to answer a few questions, and I don't want to keep you. I feel bad.
Don't worry, I can answer a couple of questions, definitely.
Okay. Are there any
Otherwise,
questions?
I'm also online, so don't worry. You can also reach me on. Sorry, I have to try to look for a light here because it's getting darker and darker. But I'm here listening to you.
She's in the Netherlands, folks, so it's quite dark there. Are there any questions you would like to? Oh, yeah, Mariana. I see your
Yes,
hand.
I do have a question. Thank you very much for taking the time to share all of this with us. It was really, really, inspiring, even though it's a bit like it's a heavy conversation. But I'm really curious to hear your opinion on, because I'm a very enthusiastic person of digital literacy, but at the same time, I see a lot of societies, and as we talked about public values agreed by collectively by the members of society, I see a lot of societies giving up, like being keen to give up on their decision power over a situation of increasing inequalities. So, of course, I'm talking from a perspective as Brazilian, as we saw in few years ago, and a rise of the extreme right politics, and we just I'm trying to make it very concise, but I'm just curious to hear your opinion on that, because it's a very sensitive topic. So I'm measuring my words.
Yeah, thank you so much. I can show you the origin of
my God.
Because she wants to come and see what's going on
Oh
here.
my
This is
God.
Emma.
Hello.
So you can see why I'm worried about our technological future also for this. Because it's not only us, but also when she's our age or my age, I'm older than you, but probably the world is gonna look even more gloomy. Anyway, so you are essentially asking about the role of literacy, but also the fact that people don't care and actually like to have technological solutions. Is it what you're asking about? Because I was a little bit distracted by this one.
Yes, I'm asking because people are very eager for solutions that solve very complex problems in a simple way, and technology comes as this solution that can solve very questions such as public safety in places like Brazil that is very aggravated by inequality. We know that, but the solution is very long term, and people are able, not able, but keen to let it go of some rights, privacy rights, when they are looking for some short-term solution to feel more safe in public space, for instance.
Yeah, actually for Brazil, I mean, there's plenty of interesting development in Brazil. One of the cases that I often use, one of the solution the example that I use is actually from using facial recognition cameras in Salvador de Bahia to identify criminals, even during carnivals, because there was this guy that would disguise himself and went out as a woman and went out thinking that he would not be identified, just to, he was hiding from the cops. and but it was identified. So of course, there's plenty of examples as to why this technology help us. Now, the problem here is similar to the old justification. I've got nothing to hide. I'm on the safe side of history, so to speak, and I also have the right to live in a safer environment. So whatever happens, bring it on. Now, what I think needs, and again, I'm not against technological solutions per se, but what I think needs to happen is much more transparency and also much more talking about these things. Because in the moment in which you actually show people how it affects them, which is normally even affecting, I mean, is usually often talking about private life. Like, you know, if you have some funky sexual preferences, then they might be found, and, you know, or if you talk about their money, which is another always good example to talk about, you know, a good segue to talk about the negative effects of certain technology, then they usually listen. So in a way, talking more, using the available spaces that we have, like for example, in the Netherlands, we use extensively public libraries for that, to also reach people that are not like the young generation like you, but equally they vote, right? So we don't meet in school, for example, like adult education, but they're equally important when it comes to decisions made for everyone. So and ultimately also educating policymakers. Then you know, it's not that I have no magic wand, unfortunately, or solution to give you, but talking more about this, leveraging the collaboration with journalists to, for example, go public with stories of when technology goes wrong, and using, as I said, examples like how technology might spy on you on like in areas of human activities like you know, sexual preferences or income and money that people are sensitive to, might do the trick in part, at least. I don't have much better solution though, sadly. But definitely Brazil is a very interesting case to track all of this. In fact, in our projects, we are going to look at also at Brazil as a case study.
That's
Thank
incredible.
you. Yes.
Carolina, I will give you the word, but also others who want to ask questions, please be concise. Ask the question, because then we can go a bit faster. Carolina.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to consolidate my thoughts. First, thank you for the lecture. It was amazing. I got really interested when you talk about AI because it works under mysterious ways. You're not very aware about it. I was reading in a book some days ago that, for example, when you're using an app to make you a route, maybe sometimes you have a congestion, a traffic jam in some part. But if you make like a shortcut for people, you have to choose the people that you will provide this shortcut based on certain criteria. Because if you like just put everyone to this shortcut, actually you will create 2 traffic jams. So AI have to rely on some criteria to choose the people who will save this time. And this criteria is not very common knowledge, right? Like it has
Transparent. It's not
yeah,
transparent.
exactly. So the question is, these technologies are becoming more and more used and standard in our daily life. And I wanted to ask you what do you think about it? If we should like more or less stop it, or at least delay it a bit before knowing how it works better until like making it like so standard like it is today, or if you are should we rely on some extent of not understanding exactly the mechanisms in order to use this technology, and to which extent should we allow this uncertainty, you know?
Yeah, thank you very much. I try to be brief because they're calling me. So, but very interesting question. I also saw some very interesting question in the chat. And unfortunately, I'm not really able now for quite enough time to go into, but hopefully maybe we can do it over an email. But so, Yeah, I mean, technology is developed also by trial and error, by beta testing that I mentioned, right? The beta testing that I mentioned earlier. So there is an extent to which we have to accept and embrace the uncertainty of technology use, because it's the only like that we are going to have better technology. That said, we also have safeguards. We also have, there are ways of doing it which probably do not involve the entire sector of the situation or the population. So you can maybe test the technology in a neighborhood. I'm a scientist, so I'm all in for testing, but it's similar to sandboxing, right? So creating a sort of artificial community, which might be made of or is made by real people, but these real people know what is happening to them. So I agree that there are some experiments being done, but that maybe we need these experiments and this data and this insight for the bettering of society as a whole. So you also need incentives, by the way, for this to happen. It happens in some situations, some countries, but not enough. Also from the perspective of, as a scientist that works on this. So there are probably solutions that go for the middle ground. Like in all cases, everything we are talking about is much better addressed than ever when we are talking about concrete cases, rather than the general, situation. So we need to assess different technologies in different environments. But what I want to really make sure is that we really pay great attention to the frameworks that you already have, like, for example, the human rights. We cannot really, certain things can simply not be done if they are, a crime, for example, right? Or if they harm human rights in certain ways. I'm sorry, I really have to go. I don't know whether you hear little Emma screaming in the background. I'm sorry.
No,
but,
thank you so
the
much.
question is a bit difficult. I am on email, and I'm happy to continue the conversation to the extent in which is possible. I see some of the questions; they're fantastic. So
thank you. We will discuss the questions among ourselves. But on behalf of TU Delft and my colleagues who are here, thank you so very much for being here with us and with family life and children, which is wonderful actually. It's so nice to see your daughter. Thank you, and we will see you around, Stefania.
Yeah, keep me posted about the outcome of this. I'm very curious. Good luck.
We will. Thank you.
Thank you. Ciao.
Bye.
Guys, thank you so much for your questions, and there are quite a few questions. Unfortunately, as you could see, it was not possible to answer them. Today, I would like to propose that we do our usual exercise that we do during the manifesto, which is to put you in breakout rooms randomly. So you will end up with 5 people in your breakout room, and maybe I would like you to invite you to introduce yourself super briefly to your colleagues in the room, because otherwise it takes up all the time, and to discuss the questions that you have. Maybe somebody can ask a question in the group. What I want from this exercise is if you could tell us in the end what are the main lessons learned or insights that you had towards the Just City from the perspective of critical data science. I think that was a super. Caroline, do you want to complement this?
Yeah, I think what I really find very fascinating when Stefania was talking is that it's very relevant for us to really think about these new technologies. And I liked very much that she mentioned the pluriverse, because I think it's being aware of the technology, the new technology, what it could bring, but also the dangers, but without forgetting that there's also a lot of interesting work or interesting knowledge in vernacular practices, for example, or indigenous knowledge and so on. So although we're kind of we steam ahead into this innovation technology direction, we should not forget the the vernacular indigenous knowledge and practices that exist and that we can also learn from. So for me, that is an interesting reflection when she's talking. And a second point is that very often I was thinking about the work of, we discussed it 12 weeks ago, of, I'm going to, sorry, pronounce it, of Hans' work. Juliana is already laughing, but this kind of us being completely okay with this public exposure on in the virtual realm and in social media. So how we deal with it? I will put the work the work in the chat, so people who are interested in his work, it's really super interesting and relevant. So those are the things that I was reflecting.
Juliana, would you like to say something about? Let me tell you, Juliana is an engineer, so she has a special relationship with technology.
Yeah, maybe what I want to add is that at least in our program at TU Delft, I think we don't speak enough about technology and how technology is being used in planning and design and how it affects what we do and how, in the end, technology shapes space. And I think it's something we should be talking more in urbanism and architecture education. And I was very happy to have Stefania here with us today to bring these different ideas.
And one of the outcomes of this lecture, I think, is to make you aware of philosophy of technology, which I think it's not a common topic of discussion in many schools, so that you can think about it. I put in the chat, I said, think about it as a career path. I'm going to open the rooms. So if you could, we are going to have breakout rooms. Please don't worry too much about outcomes. I just want you to introduce yourself, see what is the main takeaways from this lecture, and please tell us if it tells you about the Just City in some way. I'm going to do it right now. So yes, see you in a bit. I think you have to join. You will find a button saying join. People are joining. All right. Well, there are a few people here in the room still. You have to join the breakout rooms, but I can imagine that some people they are not able. It's also fine. Wow, what a lecture, right? She is amazing, this woman. You're mute,
talking
Caroline.
with sorry, it was also very accessible, super nice, very clear. You're still recording, I think, Roberto.
I will stop the recording.